Welcome to the Joinery Business Podcast. My name is Bruce and I'm going to be your host today. Today we are carrying on with our 9 foundations to every joinery business and what you can do to focus on the right things to grow your business. Today we're working on the 3rd foundation, which is working on your team and how do you get your team cohesion together so that everybody within your team in your business is helping you grow your business. Look, the reality of any business, and particularly joinery businesses, is that you will not be able to grow your business on your own. You're going to need to get your team to do it with you, and for them for that matter. So team unity is in the top 3 most important things you can do to get your business to grow and get to the stability levels that you want it to be. So today I'm going to go over some of the key areas to look for in growing your team and getting the stability in your team that you need. And we're going to talk a little bit about the transitions through the areas that you need to get your team working really well together. So let's jump into it. Team flow is a topic that we talk about quite a bit in our Recalibrate program and in our GPS program. So this is a bit of a presentation from one of those programs. One of the things we hear a lot from business owners is they're a little bit frustrated because they just can't get their team to make decisions on things. If this is something that's happening with you, it's something you really want to work on. This can often happen when people are coming to you and asking you questions. I had a conversation with a joinery business team a couple of days ago. It was a father and son team. Father had been running the business for probably close to 20 or 30 years. Son was just looking to take over the business. Father wants to get out of the business. Now, part of the problem is they were saying that the team just won't make decisions or they're just not capable of doing things. But the reality was the father was answering the questions the entire time someone was asking him questions. So as long as the dynamic between those two people is exactly as it is, it'll never change. You won't need to make a decision if you have somebody answering your questions all the time. So the reality is people will make decisions when they're required to do so. So we've got to work sometimes on how to help your team make decisions. Some of the other things that we feel or we hear a lot from joinery business owners is you need your team, your team needs you to be there. You just feel like you have to hold their hand through everything. Again, this is a little bit of a perception in many cases, but it's also a feeling that you'll have if you're not actually allowing your team to grow or letting go of some things. So needing to hold their hand is a really it's a very negative feeling to have as an owner. One of the other things that we hear business owners say a lot is their managers are just not leading their teams. You might say from time to time, I'm telling them what to do, they're just not doing it. Or your leaders might be saying that as well. So internally within your business, it's so important that you do create leaders within your teams that people will follow or will respect and take direction from. So sometimes you just might say your managers just aren't leading their teams effectively, and therefore you have to sort of jump in and do it. And the end result of all of this is, you end up feeling like you just can't leave them alone for a minute. What a horrible feeling. You have a business, and the business is, created to give you this wealth and this freedom in life that you want, but you might be in a position right now where you actually feel like you actually can't leave them alone for a minute without, fearing that the whole business is going to collapse or, there's going to be some bad things going on. So not feeling like you can leave them alone for a minute or at least days on end is a really terrible feeling to have. What we really want is we want your people to know exactly what to do. They should know with certainty what they need to do, when they need to do it, how they need to do it, and all of that sort of stuff so that they can just get on with it. And the main thing here is you need your team to just get on with it. If they're spending a lot of time asking questions, trying to get details, looking for work instruction, they're not getting on with it. So that doesn't build great team cohesion and team unity. So we need to find a way to get your team flowing so that they just get on with it. The other thing you need from your team is you need them to step up and take charge of whatever area they're working in your business. It could be that you have some people in a very basic position in your business. They might be assembling drawers, they might be sanding board, they might be stacking sheets, but they need to take charge of that position they are in business. So everybody needs to feel like they're empowered to take charge of whatever it is they're doing. Nobody should feel like they're a passenger. Nobody should feel like they're just there to be told what to do all the time. Everybody should feel like they can step up and take charge of what they're doing. Doesn't necessarily mean that somebody on an assembly bench can step up and take charge of management, but they can take charge of the assembly bench, that's for sure. So whatever area someone's working in, they have to feel like they're empowered and they're required to step up and take charge. So that you can just leave them to it, and if you choose to work in the business in your chosen area as the owner, you might choose to work in the sales department, or you might choose to work in the production department or the finance department, or whatever area you feel most comfortable in the business. It's nice for you to feel like you can do that and leave the other departments to do what they need to do. Just leave them to it and they get on with it. That's really important for you to be able to let go of that sort of part of your business, and your team's got your back and they're doing it. Now, a lot of people listening to this right now might be saying, hey, Bruce, that sounds really cool, but it's just never going to happen. And I'd like to introduce you to someone. Now, a few podcasts ago, this might be sometime last year, we talked to Darren McCavanagh, and you'll remember this, and if you don't remember it, you can go back and replay one of our old podcasts from The Kitchen Maker. So Darren McCavanagh is an example I use from time to time. He's a great guy, he's worked really hard, but he's also worked really smart and really intentionally on creating a business that he didn't need to be in. Darren's a little bit unusual in that most joinery business owners actually want to work in the business. That's, they have a passion to work in the business. So even if the business didn't need them in it, they still choose to be there. Point here being that it was actually a choice. Darren's choice was to not be working in the business, and he was able to do that by planning it that way. Every single person that runs a business, doesn't matter what business it is, in this case we're talking to joinery business owners, it doesn't matter what sort of business you have, it matters how you plan that business to operate. And if you don't plan your business to be able to operate without you, it will always require you to be working in the business, and you will always feel that weight on your shoulders. So Darren's a great guy, and he has, with intention, all pandemics aside, been able to take the time off throughout the year that he wants, go sailing, go skiing, go fishing, do whatever he wants to do, because he knows his business is taking over and doing the great things that he needs it to do to support him in what he wants to do in life. So as we reflect back on those things, thinking about what Darren has achieved and what you can achieve as well, what are the things that you can think of that you might need help with most? Is it that maybe your team just isn't making the decisions that they need to make, and you find that you're answering questions all day long? Is it that you actually need to be there while they're doing the work, holding their hand, walking them through it? Is that what resonates most with you? Or do you feel maybe like your managers are just not stepping up and taking charge of the team, and you find that maybe you're having to step in too often to take over the team cohesiveness and answer questions rather than your leaders do it? Just give that some thought. What is it you need most help with right now? So as we work forward in this, I'm going to give you sort of 5 key thinking points as to what we need to do moving forward, and then we're going to work into a little bit of a business model here. So when you're working on getting your team cohesiveness together, when you're working on getting your team together to gel together, to work really well together, there's 5 focus areas that I'd like you to think about. One of them is, how do we stop blaming people? How do we stop creating blame in your team? It's so common for blame to be there and to be this disengaging sort of elephant in the room that everybody doesn't talk about. Cabinet makers in general are great at solving problems, and if someone on an assembly bench feels that they've made a mistake, they are absolutely not going to tell people about it in most cases. But the reality is, if a mistake ends up on an assembly bench, it's probably because it came from machining or it came from drafting. And we need everybody to feel like not only are they not going to be blamed if they made a mistake, but the person that made the mistake, maybe in machining and drafting, isn't going to be blamed either. Mistakes are not a human problem. They're a process problem. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes, but we need to get this blame culture out of your team if it exists. The second thing we want to really get a focus on is the fact that mistakes are actually opportunities. Now you probably hear this all the time, right? Where you hear people saying, oh yeah, mistakes are opportunities. I think it's great. If we make mistakes, it's an opportunity to learn. And most people go, well, what a load of crap that is. It's, mistakes just cost me money. That's absolutely true. Mistakes cost you money. And that's the point. If we don't learn from the mistake that just happened and try with intent to stop it from happening again, it is going to reoccur over and over and over and over again. And it's going to cost you more and more and more money every single time. So if we just blame people because they've made a mistake, we're not doing anything to solve the problem at all. We're just making somebody feel bad. And then if they do make a mistake, they're going to cover it up, but it's going to keep reoccurring anyway. We're just not going to know about it. So we do have to take on the concept of mistakes or opportunities to make improvements in your process. The third focus point is everybody on your team needs to feel and know with certainty that their contributions are valued, that they as humans, as a part of the team, are valued, and everything that everybody has to say is, it's valuable to everything you want to do in your business. People need to feel empowered to speak up at team meetings and give their ideas. There are no, stupid ideas. There are no stupid questions. But what can be bad is if someone doesn't do that sort of stuff. So people need to know that that you value their contribution. That if someone is on an assembly bench, that they are the experts in assembly, and you need to hear their voice. The third focus point really is that I think it's so important that business owners and teams feel like they're actually part of a community. Feeling like you're part of a community is much different than feeling like you're part of a business team. Communities are places that nurture and grow each other. Communities are places that accept that people have good days and bad days. And communities are places that think of lifetimes, not years. If you're in a community, you think of nurturing a child and helping that child grow up to be a great person. If you think about the community that you grow up in, most likely you're thinking of a wonderful place that you would go back to, or maybe you didn't want to leave, and maybe you didn't leave. So if you think about building a community rather than building a team, it has a very different connotation to it. Again, communities are accepting places that are safe, and long-term relationships come from communities. The fifth focus point is we want people thinking about the lanes that they have in the business and staying within their lanes. So for example, if someone on an assembly bench gets a job to assemble, it really isn't their place to critique and criticize the design of the kitchen. That is really up to the design team. So everybody has to have clear lanes that they work in. Now that doesn't mean that someone might not have input in the appropriate times in those areas, but primarily their job is to stay in their lane and do the work that they are assigned to do. And when appropriate, we have input on all areas of the business, but primarily you want to stay in your lane. That's important because when you know that the people over in that area are doing a good job, and they know that you in your area are doing a good job, then everybody kind of focuses on the main things that they need to do in business, and they do it pretty well. What happens when you get people staying in their lanes and very clear on what their job roles are in the business, we start growing champions within every department within the business. And it's really important that people don't feel like they need to do everything in the business because nobody's really specializing in any area. So creating lanes to run in and getting everybody to stay in those lanes. Again, I'd probably ask you, if you're listening to this right now, what are the areas that you think you need to focus on most? Is it removing blame from your culture? Is it maybe you need help thinking of mistakes as opportunities rather than costly things in your business? Do you need help getting your upper management team or yourself to look at your team as valuable contributors to the growth of the business? Do you need help building a community, thinking about it like that rather than a team with a team structure? Or do you need help creating lanes like job roles and responsibilities for people to run in? Which ones of those 5 areas do you think maybe are focus points for you? So that's about building a team. Now I wanted to run through a little bit of a business model for you here right now. Now if you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to describe for you what I'm drawing, but if you're watching on YouTube right now, you'll be able to see what I'm drawing. I've got essentially a matrix in front of me, and the north-south matrix. The north is pointing to what we say staff are engaged. In other words, this matrix has highly engaged staff, and the opposite end of this, in other words, the south end, is maybe you've got staff that are disengaged. That's one end of the scale to the other. And we're talking here about how do we grow better leadership and better culture within your team. So you either are going to have staff that are highly engaged, or you're going to have staff that are disengaged. The other matrix that I've got here is the west to east, or the east to west matrix. So on the far west, we've got the thing that will help people do great work. And if you're not doing great work, or you're not having great results, most likely what you have is no process. If you have no process, you're not going to be able to get a repeatable outcome. It's just going to be a very random thing. Sometimes things turn out great, sometimes they don't, but if you don't know why, then there's no way to repeat that. So the way to do that is to create a process that is a repeatable process, that has a repeatable outcome that you can improve. And of course, if one end of the scale is no process, the other end of the scale is great process. Okay, so we've got the matrix set up with highly engaged staff or disengaged staff, and the other side, the east to west, is no process or great process. So in the top left quadrant of this matrix, in between no process and highly engaged staff, this is what we call the low cash zone. So low cash zone is where you might be in business, because you might find that even though you have great people doing great things and really, really engaged, it's not going to stay that way for very long, because if they're not following a process and getting great outcomes, pretty soon, if it hasn't happened already, pretty soon it's going to slip back, because you're going to get all kinds of defects and errors. And what's going to happen is you're going to move from this low cash zone, you're going to move into what we call the defect zone. And the defect zone just simply happens because you take great staff that are highly engaged, really want to do great work, but they don't have a great process, or that process isn't really well known. And pretty soon what happens is all kinds of defects and errors are happening, and they become very disengaged, very disillusioned, very disconnected from the business. And the other thing that can happen is you might have staff that are disengaged, but they are following a great process. So this movement into improving your staff can actually happen when you have disengaged staff. So the third quadrant that we're talking about here, which is the bottom right quadrant, is what we call the disengagement zone. If you're following me on YouTube, I apologize for my bad handwriting. It's the best I can do. But the disengagement zone is where you have really, really good process, but you still haven't got really engaged people. They just are not on board with the wonderful processes that you've created yet. And so we've got to fix that. We've got to get people engaged and interested in the business so that you can get them into what we call flow zone. So flow zone is the top right quadrant that I'm dealing with here. We're going to make this one red because let's make it a really good quadrant. So when you get people flowing, you'll see it, you'll feel it, you'll know it when it's happening in your business, because there's all kinds of great conversations going on in your business. You'll be able to, you'll be able to see it, you'll be able to feel it, and great work will be happening. You'll have low defects, you will have very low errors that are going on, and that is simply a result of having really engaged staff and really great processes. So, the reality here is that in order to create a great cohesive team, you've really got to start with the processes that you are giving your team to work in, or start with your team as a place to start with how do you improve your processes. Because if you have great processes, but you didn't actually engage your team in creating those processes, what can happen is you're going to get this disengaged team with great processes that doesn't really help you much either. So you're going to still stay in this disengaged zone. If the improvement of your processes is part of your team unity, if part of your business is getting your people together and saying, okay, if you're on an assembly bench, or if you are running the CNC machine or the edge bander, Get them to write down the process that they're following. Get them to tell you what's the process that they're following and what are they using. They are the experts in those areas. And then you can just simply sit down and have a conversation about how do you improve that process. That automatically creates team engagement. That automatically creates a closer knit culture. Once someone creates a process that they say, this is how we do things, this is how I do it, this is how I do it to get great outcomes, as soon as that becomes public knowledge and accepted practice in your business, the person that put their hand up and said that will have to own that. They'll have to then take it on board. And what happens commonly in that situation is those people that have done that then take on board the improvement of that process, because they have now said this is a great process. But humans have a really interesting natural willingness to want to improve and grow and get better. So if you're in an assembly area and you say, great, this is how I assemble cabinets, and we document that process, and then we get everybody to follow the same process because we've all agreed that it's the best process, most people will then look at that automatically and start thinking about ways to improve it, ways to get it better. But it won't happen unless it's a documented process that's the accepted standard in your business. When it stays in people's heads, when the process that individual people are following is just in their head, that will, what will happen is people will defend the process that's in their head as the best process. And everybody will do the same thing. So you might have 4 or 5 assemblers on assembly benches, all doing things differently, all saying that the way they do things is the best way. It's all in their head. It's all, not the accepted standard way of doing things. And I've been involved in this so many times where we get a group of people on an assembly bench saying, oh, no, the way I assemble cabinets is the best way. And the next person says, no, mine's the best way. And everybody kind of has the same saying. That's a defending of what you think your practice is. But as soon as we get people to write it down, we go from defending it to analyzing it and processing it. So as soon as it gets written down, it's now not in your head. Now it's on paper. Now the interesting thing with this is oftentimes when we get a group of people in a factory, for example, at assembly benches, writing down their processes, after they write it down, they don't look at theirs. They try and look at what everybody else wrote. And that's just proof that they don't really believe that theirs is the best way. They believe theirs is a good way, but they're just as interested to see what everybody else has done because they actually are open to looking at other ways of doing things. And in the end, the best result here is you come up with one process that is the best process. Now, if you approach every process in your business, whether it's your sales process, whether it's your tech drawing process, whether it's your machining, no matter what the individual processes are, the people in those processes need to be doing it the same way every single time so that you can predict what the outcome is going to be. And that way you can create a nice, stable workforce that has nice, cohesive culture to it, and there's no blame game. I do it this way, that's the best way, you're not doing it my way. That sort of conversation needs to be taken out of the scenario, and you need to create a standard way that your business operates. And that's one great way to create amazing team unity and great team culture. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. If this sounds like something that you'd like to learn more about, how to create better team, how to create better unity amongst your team, and how to get better business results from that, please feel free to reach out to us. You can reach us in many ways. The best way really is to jump into our free Facebook group, the Joinery Business Hub. You'll have to answer 3 questions, and I'm sorry, but that's just the rules. We have to know you're human and you're serious about being in the group. But they're pretty easy questions. We just need to answer them. And once you've done that, jump into the group and we'll have a conversation about how we can help you more in these areas. Or if you'd like to learn more about this sort of stuff, jump onto our website, thejoinerycoach.com, and you can go to the contact us and just contact us. They're nice and easy. But love to chat with you. Even if it's, like I say, just a quick Facebook chat, jump into our group and we can carry on from this and expand out a little bit more. I love to hear your questions, love to hear your comments, and just generally connect up and see how you're going in business. That's it for me. Hopefully this has been helpful, but if it's been helpful, hopefully even more so, it's been useful. You probably hear me say quite often, I love being helpful, but rather be useful. Bruce from the Joinery Business Podcast and the Joinery Coach. Have a great day. Peace out.